UNC shocks the basketball world, bringing in former Denver Nuggets coach and NBA champion Michael Malone. They said they wanted a big fish, and they got one. We've got team coverage for the beginning of this new era for UNC hoops.
A break from the heat this week with cooler air and chilly mornings. How low temperatures will fall this week and who could wake up to frost.
And the race for North Carolina's open Senate seat is set. Roy Cooper faces off against Michael Wiley in what's already a very expensive race. So we wanted to know, how often does the campaign with the most money actually win? We'll talk to our NC Capital team about why the money is so important. The Triangle's game of musical coaches is complete. Michael Wiley starts counting some campaign cash, and North Carolina thinks about adding train service to the beach. Thank you for being here at 7 o'clock. I'm Dan Haggerty.
And I'm Ashley Rowe. We hope you enjoyed the holiday weekend, and we hope you keep those emails coming into the 7 p.m. inbox. 7 p.m. at WRAL.com. That's our email address. Send us your feedback, your questions, any ideas. What stories should we cover this week? Please let us know.
We want to get to a viewer question from a viewer named Mark asking, any news about the UNC basketball coaching position? Well, Mark, glad you asked. Huge news out of Chapel Hill tonight. Michael Malone will now be the new head coach of the men's basketball team.
At least two sources confirmed the hire to WRAL this afternoon. A lot of names were flying around the last few weeks, right? But Michael Malone got the job. We have team coverage on this story tonight. Brian Murphy is here for a live edition of Murph's Turf.
How about that?
But let's start with WRAL's Eric Miller in Chapel Hill.
Eric, you were out there, you were talking to students and fans on campus. Are they surprised by this hire? Do they support it? What are the vibes there tonight?
And then surprised, yes. Excited, also, yes. UNC fans, for the most part, they seem to be really behind this move. They like Malone's experience. They like his record. There is a little bit of concern out there that, he hasn't coached at the college level in decades, literally longer than any of his players will be old by the time he actually steps into this job. But that's a sin that UNC fans, at least for the time being, are willing to forgive. For the students out there, there is some real excitement about this and some comparisons that have been tossed around to Bill Belichick, with a lot of students hoping that Malone brings that same excitement, that same energy that Belichick brought to the start of this last football season.
I was surprised. I was in math class, and a friend next to me who knows a lot more about this than I do was talking about how he's one of the best coaches.
I didn't believe it at first because it came out of the blue. I'd heard Billy Donovan, I'd heard about Tommy Lloyd, but I hadn't heard about Malone. So I'm very excited.
It's not going to be an instant win, even though we are a blue blood program and Mike Malone's a great coach. I'm looking forward to the next 3 years, but there's still some reserves.
And while those Bill Belichick comparisons are getting thrown around out there, there is also the caveat and the hope that Malone's first season this coming year goes a whole lot better than Belichick's first season. Guys?
All right, Eric, thank you for that report. Now, let's take a trip to Murph's Turf.
Well, this is fun, bringing you a live edition of Murph's Turf tonight. Murph, UNC finally has its new men's basketball coach, Michael Malone. Let's start with the basics. Who is Michael Malone?
Well, he's a very accomplished NBA coach. He served for 10 years as the coach of the Denver Nuggets. A lot of that time with Nikola Jokic. Took him to an NBA title in 2023. Before that, he coached the Sacramento Kings for a couple of years. And his dad was an accomplished high school, college, and professional coach as well. So Michael Malone comes with a lot of winning pedigree.
And you pulled some interview from not too long ago either. Tell me a little bit about that. I guess we've been seeing him around campus.
Yeah, his daughter, Bridget, plays for the UNC volleyball team. And so he spent a lot of time on campus, told the Carolina Insider podcast in October just how much he loves Chapel Hill and that he roots for all of the teams, was wearing a UNC sweatshirt, a UNC hat. He's worn that on other appearances as well, and was even at basketball practice, attended 5 or 6 basketball practices even before the season started. Hubert Davis brought him down to the floor, had him talk to some of the players.
The first practice I went to was in the practice gym. Then the first time I was in the big gym, the manager brought me in to sit upstairs. The next thing I see Hubert Davis waving, "No, bring him down here." So then I was sitting on the floor. And I thought, this is nice. I had no idea what that meant, though, until I went to dinner with Pat Sullivan. And he said, "Hey, that's a really big honor." Because I didn't coach here, I didn't play here, I didn't graduate from Carolina, and that seat is reserved for family.
I'm definitely not done coaching. Coaching is in my blood. I got that from my father, and I'm excited to get back coaching on those sidelines and teaching once again.
I can't help but
maybe we should have seen this come.
Go ahead, Murph. Go ahead.
Maybe we should have seen this coming, Ashley. Yeah, maybe we should have seen this coming. Talking to the basketball team, wearing all the gear, saying he's not done coaching yet.
I can't help, Murph, but see a bit of a parallel between this coaching hire and then what UNC did with Bill Belichick and the football team. They're taking the guy who coached for the pros for a long time, bringing him to college. Does Malone face a similar learning curve? Is that an off-base question?
Yeah, certainly not an off-base question, right? You've got two guys who have won championships at the professional level, now coming to Chapel Hill, trying to do the same at the college level. I think the difference here is that basketball, the roster size is so small. If Michael Malone and staff can land 3 or 4 star players, they'll be way ahead of the game, as opposed to Bill Belichick having to turn over the entire roster, teach them a new offense, a new defense. I think just basketball, it's a lot easier to contend with fewer players. You don't have to know this whole universe out there. I think one of the interesting things is Michael Malone had so much success with Nikola Jokic. This game, college basketball, becoming such an international game, can he use some of those connections to maybe land some players from Eastern Europe? We've seen what Illinois was able to do with players from Eastern Europe. Earlier this year, they made it to the Final Four. So does that recruiting help the fact that he's won with players from all over the world?
Maybe. Hey, you mentioned Malone's connections to UNC, but I got to ask, how did we get to this point, right? We were talking about UNC's shortlist for a couple of weeks. I don't remember Malone being a part of that conversation.
Yeah, his name sort of popped up in the last few days, late last week. But you're right. I mean, how did we get here? Well, UNC fired Hubert Davis, and I think everybody thought they were going to land one of the biggest coaches in the game, whether that was Tommy Lloyd at Arizona or Dusty May at Michigan, or Billy Donovan with the Chicago Bulls. And then there was sort of a second tier of guys like McCollum at Iowa, Grant McCaslin at Texas Tech, even Scott Drew's name at Baylor. He's won a national title. He came up. I think what we're seeing is how hard it is to move coaches in this NIL era. If you've got an administration that backs you, you've got a large buyout, and you've got a huge NIL budget, there's no reason to try to recreate what you've done in Iowa or what you've done at Arizona here at North Carolina. There's just stay where you are, keep the good times rolling rather than try to rebuild. We've seen it at Indiana. We've seen it at other places in other sports too, where the blue blood name, the history, the tradition doesn't quite mean as much when it comes time to find a new coach.
Murph, appreciate it. Thank you.
Love the music. Let's get to a story that's happening right now here at 7 o'clock, and I mean literally right now. At this very moment, the Artemis 2 astronauts, they are reaching that point in their mission, taking them farther than any human has ever traveled into space. Brian Schrader following this force in the WRAL Live Center. Brian.
Dan, I would say that we could witness history together, but there's nothing to see right now because there is a communications blackout on Artemis 2. They are on the other side of the moon, but they should emerge from the other side of the moon in about 10 minutes or so, and they should be able to reestablish communications then. But right now, they are at the maximum point from Earth, the apogee, 252,760 miles from Earth as they round the moon, and now they're going to get closer to Earth by the second. Earlier this afternoon, they surpassed the record for the farthest distance from Earth any human had ever been, 248,000 miles, set by Apollo 13 back in 1970. So an absolutely amazing day in space, and they're going to keep working through the night. Again, 7:25, they're going to see Earth rise, and we should get that communication restored. And then between 8:35 and about 9:30 tonight, they're going to be on the other side of the moon and experiencing a solar eclipse. They're going to be able to also analyze the corona from their vantage point there in space, so they'll be able to gather some information that couldn't get from Earth. And then about 9:20 tonight, that's when the lunar observations will conclude, and they'll be on their way back to Earth for that splashdown Friday.
Stuff. All right, Brian, thank you. Meantime, let's roll you through some of the other big headlines. These are the 5 things you should know right now. A bomb threat scare at a Walmart in Durham this afternoon. Sky 5 here over the scene. This is the Supercenter on Glen School Road. Officials closed the store this afternoon while they investigated. No credible threat was found. The store, we're told, is now back open. Another phony bomb threat today in Durham, this one at the Research Triangle Charter Academy. Police clearing that campus around 11 a.m., hours after the threat first came in. The building was evacuated and students were then sent home for the day. Tonight, Johnston County approved a financing plan for the new Clayton High School. This new school will be designed with special attention to security and safety. The school will hold up to 2,000 students and is expected to open in the fall of 2028.
Tonight, DOT will set up detours as crews work to expand 540. Closures will only take place overnight, so it shouldn't be too bad on traffic. I-87 between Smithfield and Hodge Roads will be blocked off for the next few days. The entire 540 expansion will connect the Triangle Expressway to the I-40 interchange near Garner and Clayton. And North Carolina is working to get a passenger train route from Raleigh to the coast. The state is working with the federal government to expand service to at least 7 new destinations, including Wilmington, Fayetteville, Kings Mountain, Atlanta, and Winston-Salem. Officials say Amtrak ridership is up about 60% since 2019. The Raleigh to Wilmington line could cost about $810 million and run 6 times a day. Federal funding could cover most of it, but it could be many years before service begins. Lots more to talk about here at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, like the millions of dollars pouring into North Carolina for the midterm elections. We are looking into how much money is available so far and why money is so important in elections. How often does the big spender, you might wonder, actually go on to win the race? We're going to talk about it next.
And how much would you pay for a one-of-a-kind baseball card? How about $15,000? That story in tonight's One Last Thing. Kat?
And you may need to cover up your plants tomorrow night. I'll let you know who's most at risk for a frost coming up.
Let's look ahead at some of the news stories we are keeping an eye on this week. President Trump's deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz is tomorrow. He's giving Iran until 8 p.m. to reopen the strait, or he will direct the military to target power plants, bridges, and other infrastructure.
On Friday, we're going to see for the first time how the war in Iran is affecting prices here at home. The March inflation report will come out. Forecasters project inflation to jump about 3%.
And the Masters start Thursday. Among the golfers invited this year are Wake Forest native Akshay Bhatia, as well as UNC grads Ryan Gerard and Ben Griffin. We'll be right back. Here's what's coming up tonight on WRAL News at 11. Carrie Everett, Miss North Carolina 2024, died over the weekend from stomach cancer. She was diagnosed last summer. Tonight, we hear from people who knew her and ask doctors how often her form of cancer appears in young people. Such a sad story. It's tonight on WRAL News at 11.
Let's talk about the U.S. Senate race here in North Carolina. That's the one between Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley. Now, look, it's only April, but the money is already starting to pour in. One group pledging $71 million to support Whatley, spending most of that cash on attack ads. As WRAL's Megan Cloherty explains, even more money and more ads are likely on the way.
Less than a week after the Catawba University poll showed Michael Whatley trailing 14 points behind in this race, his campaign is seeing green.
The Senate Leadership Fund is planning to spend the majority of the $71 million on ads going after Whatley's Democratic challenger, former Governor Roy Cooper. They're competing for the seat being vacated by Senator Thom Tillis, who back in 2014 saw about $100 million spent on that race.
Carolina has broken national records for spending on Senate races before. We frequently see tons of money pouring in part because we are such a competitive state year in and year out. So this $71 million is a huge amount of money, but it's also not particularly surprising because we were expecting this year to be incredibly expensive yet.
The $71 million is only part of what the New York Times reports is $342 million being spent by the group on key races nationwide. We asked Whatley last week about the recent Elon University poll showing that Cooper led in name recognition and popularity.
I've never run for office, so my name recognition is a little bit lower. But whenever we have the conversations with people across this state, we are getting our points through.
Meanwhile, the Democratic Senate Majority PAC say they also plan to spend millions in North Carolina, but have not decided how much. Its press secretary telling us, quote, Republicans know they're staring down defeat this November, so it's no surprise they're showing their hand this early.
Now, we likely won't see any ads from either side until later this summer, but we know what they'll be focused on. The Cooper campaign is going to go heavily on affordability and the economy. And as far as Whatley's side, they're going to focus on public safety. In Raleigh, Megan Cloherty, WRAL News.
Let's quickly talk, though, about why the money in these campaigns is just so important. And you probably already get where I'm going with this, because it does feel like every election year the news is saying that this is the most expensive race in history, that sort of thing. And it is true. More and more money just keeps pouring into these elections. And this is why. 538, they analyzed all the congressional elections between the year 2000 and 2016. And 90% of the time, the candidate who raised the most money won the race. The only exception was in 2010 when the number was 86%. It's not 100%, right? Money doesn't always win elections. Kamala Harris raised hundreds of millions of dollars more than President Trump, but Trump won the race. But most of the time, more money means more wins. And that's why Republicans need to be selective about where they spend their money. Sure, they committed $70 million to Michael Whatley, but it's still so early. And there are lots of other races that the GOP has their eye on across the country. Here's more from Megan's conversation about that part of it with Will Doran.
This is really kind of a must-have state for Democrats. It's not a must-have state for Republicans. You know, they're looking at other states like Texas, Iowa, Maine, Alaska, trying to prevent upsets there. There might be a feeling as we get later into the summer, okay, you know, if we need to shift resources somewhere else, do we just take the money out of North Carolina? And it's really all going to come down to the polling, how Whatley is looking. Can he cut into this big lead that Cooper has built up early?
And there is some pretty recent precedent here for this sort of thing. In 2024, you remember, in the governor's race here in North Carolina, after a poor polling and a bunch of scandals with Mark Robinson, key national groups that support Republicans, they stopped spending money in North Carolina. What else do you want to know about when it comes to these important upcoming midterm elections? The candidates, the money, the issues. I know so many of you love when those attack ads start running. Send us an email, 7 p.m. at WRAL.com. Tell us what is on your mind, and we'll talk about it here at 7 o'clock.
Well, it's going to be dropping quite a bit cooler than what we've been experiencing.
Jackets are needed again. I've got my puffy jacket over there again. Had to pull it out of the back of my closet. Now, it's not going to be this cold tomorrow morning, but you're still going to want your jacket tomorrow morning when we wake up in the 40s. Tomorrow night, that's when you need to cover up your plants before you head to bed, because Wednesday morning, we're looking at frost potential, and this could even be a pretty widespread frost for us. A light freeze possible in Roxborough, South Hill, and toward the Virginia border. 35 for the low in the Triangle. That's a frost threat. 37 in Rocky Mount and Southern Pines, and a little bit less of a frost threat in our southern counties, but it's still borderline. The areas in purple here, Durham points north. These are the locations where we could see a light freeze, though a hard freeze is not likely anywhere in our viewing area. And for Wake County down into Wayne County, Johnston, Harnett County, Lee, and Moore counties, that's where the cutoff is for the main frost threat that we will see Wednesday morning. This is on par with our average last freeze of the season, so definitely not abnormal to see temperatures like this time of year. Early April, our normal low is actually still in the 40s, and that's where we're going to be tomorrow morning. 41 in Roxborough, 44 at the bus stop in Durham, 46 in Raleigh, Rocky Mount, and Goldsboro, and 48 at the bus stop in Fayetteville. Tomorrow afternoon, mostly cloudy, 66 for the high. Normal high, 68 to start the month of April. Normal low is 44, and by the end of April, 76 is our normal high. So all those 80s that we have had lately, those are not normal. This is what's actually normal for this time of year. And this week is actually going to be a little closer to normal with some of the cooler weather. I also want to mention, while we're talking about what's normal in April, it is one of our windiest months on average. March and April pretty much tie for the windier months of the year. We often see cold fronts come through that pick up the wind both ahead of them and behind them. And that's what we saw today. The clouds linger, but the cold front is offshore. We'll see a secondary front move in, and that's going to reinforce this cold clear thanks to the dip in the jet stream behind the front. Tomorrow, 66. Just 61 Wednesday, but at least Wednesday we'll have some more sunshine. Thursday and Friday we start to bounce back. 75 and mostly sunny on Friday. It's mostly sunny for the weekend with highs warming into the 80s, but there are 0 chances for rain over the next 7 days, and we really need some rain.
Hopefully it comes soon. Thank you, Kat.
A baseball card worth $15,000. Worth it? Depends on who you ask. The trading card industry is booming, and a pair of collectors in our area may have just hit the jackpot. One last thing after the break. One last thing, the money in trading cards these days is crazy.
Yeah, I would know. I spend enough. A report from Global Newswire, the trading card industry, they say, is worth about $8 billion last year. It rose to nearly $12 billion, they think, by 2030.
Well, the owners of a trading card store in Rocky Mount think they just hit the jackpot. They went to Target to scope out some inventory, and they ended up with a card worth $15,000.
I always get them from the back. Let me get one from the front this time. I see the name first, and then I see the autograph, so I'm freaking out because I'm like, this is big. Then I see the number to 3 out of 5, then I start like, oh my God, like screaming. We've been told this, it's about 15,000, anywhere on the very lowest end, 10 to 15,000.
So they pulled a rare Roman Anthony rookie card, just about 5 of this exact card with the autograph and everything in the entire world, 3 out of 5. Hadley owns Chase Cards on Sunset Avenue in Rocky Mount. The card will not be on display in the shop. They're keeping it somewhere safe before deciding what to do with it next.
How jealous are you right now?
I'm fine with this. I'm happy for him. Thanks for being with us tonight. Keep watching us here at 7 o'clock. Write in that email, 7 p.m. at WRAL.com. We'll see you back here tomorrow.